Welcome everyone to Legion Gaming. I'm your host Donnie, and as always, I'm joined by co-host Deucy.
Hello everyone.
And today we have a very special guest for the first time on our podcast here. We have Juan. How are you, sir?
So does my intro music start now, or do I have to wait a minute? How does this work?
Oh, we should have clapped for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we could have.
Hi, everybody.
I'll note it, yeah.
Well, I mean, I could drop a glass and then that would be the glass shatter.
Yeah, something tells me that's not going to work.
It won't work well. I can always edit that in post and add glass.
Oh,
You don't have to
okay.
actually shatter a
That's
glass. Dude.
that's what we do in modern days.
Yeah, that's behind the scenes magic you don't know about.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
We're very glad to have you, Juan. And today, Juan, you selected a game for us today. I think it's a very special game. So today we're covering Gunstar Heroes, one of the gems on the Sega Genesis.
Another guest choice and another Sega choice.
Yeah, which we need more of.
Yeah, I think our guests are trying to tell us something.
Yeah.
That we were poor when we were kids, I think is what we're trying to tell you.
I think it means that, we need to get a little bit more Genesis, a little bit more Sega love, even though we had a little bit.
Our guests did what Nintendo don't.
That's right. Yeah. So it's great to have Juan on here because with Gunstar Heroes, I didn't grow up with this game. I learned about it a lot later. But it's one of those treasure games that is definitely notable on the Genesis, and it's great that Juan had such fondness for it to do a whole episode because it was easy to convince us to do one. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, same for me. Like, I didn't grow up, with a Genesis at all, and really, Juan is the reason why I know about this game.
Is it really?
Yeah.
I didn't realize you hadn't heard of it before.
You hadn't played it before?
No. It wasn't even until I went over to your house that first time, and you had it on the Wii, and you were like, hey, check this game out. And I had never even heard the title or anything about it.
Wow. That's craziness.
So I first played this game as a kid, and as Deucy just said, he played it at my house on the Wii. I have it now on the Switch. Yeah. I basically download it every time I can.
It's your
I think I have it on my phone too. Like, yeah, this game and I go way back. Great game.
Yeah, so I'm excited to cover it. I think it's a great choice. Before we get to all that goodness and talk about Treasure and Gunstar, what have you guys been playing lately? So, Deucy, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I have been dabbling in a lot of little handhelds because of the analog pocket still. Got a lot of Game Gear games recently, like the Batman, the animated one, Adventures of Batman and Robin.
Yeah.
Also, Batman Returns, which I really like on the Game Gear.
The thing is, I had that when I was a kid. I just don't remember anything about it, but I know we played it a ton.
It's very much just a side scroller, not even a typical side scroller beat 'em up, because it's got the typical like maze like levels, like the X-Men Game Gear game and stuff like that. But it's a lot easier, I'd say, than the Batman and Robin one, because that one has a lot of cheap enemies that are shooting you from off screen.
Yeah, which was a kind of a thing that was common on the Game Gear, because when you told me that, I was like, yeah, that's just like X-Men.
Yeah.
And the screen is so small that you can't help but get hit anyway.
I also recently bought a lot of little cases for the Game Gear games, because when you get them loose, they don't have those old plastic covers. And the person who sent me them, it was supposed to be 29 cases for however much, and I got 2 free games in there. I was like, whoa, bonus.
What were the games?
One of them is Super Golf, which is actually worth a little bit of money. It's like $15-16 on the thing. But also, I got Star Wars. Like the original A New Hope Star Wars for Game Gear, and it's the European version, I found out, based on the little sticker cover. Mm-hmm. Really fun game. I already played the first couple levels. The first level is something I've never seen in any Star Wars game. You play as Leia, trying to get the information to R2-D2.
Oh, that's actually pretty cool. I don't remember that being in any other version either.
Wait, so what is this? You just sneak around, or?
No, you don't sneak. She has a laser blaster, and she's just blasting stormtroopers. And if you hold down the shoot button, you actually run. She runs faster than Sonic.
That's great.
I was like, at first I didn't know you could run, and then I accidentally held down the button, and she takes a little bit of like warming up, like a little like acceleration, and then suddenly I was going like, oh, whoa, too fast.
Yeah,
just zipping
that
through
momentum right through. She's like, get those Death Star plans. Yeah.
Other than that, though, I've been playing on the big screen, on the big TVs. I continued on with my Turok after our last episode, and I'm almost done with the first game. I'm surprised.
Oh wow, how many levels do you have left? Because I think you were pretty well into it when we last talked.
I just need one more key for the last level, which is only a boss fight. So I'm in the last level, and I have one out of the 2 keys that I need to get from there, and I don't know where it is. Like, I went through the entire level, and I only had one key. I was like, oh crap.
Have you been using a guide at all?
I'm going to have to go back. I didn't for that, but I should have. Because now if I go back in and try to find that other key, I don't think you can quick exit. So I'll have to find the key and then continue the level again.
Yeah, that sounds like what you had to do back then for those kinds of games too, which made it more annoying. And then, are you going to go through Turok 2 after? You can even bother with that one?
I'm going to skip over to 3.
I would say so. Someone on Threads who follows us was talking about, he saw our Turok episode, released, and he was talking about his experience with Turok 2. And everything we talked about in that episode
is exacally what
he's saying in real time. Right? He's posting these things like, "Why are these levels so huge? I'm 25 hours into this game. It's not done yet. What is this?
I'm only in level 2, 25 hours in."
So I think you're fine to skip that one because I don't think I would get through it either. Like I don't think we really got through many levels as a kid. I think not even after the first.
I don't even remember. Yeah, beating the first.
Yeah,
with codes, with invincibility and infinite ammo, all that. Nothing.
Exactly. So it's fine. I think it's
hallmark of a great game.
Exactly.
Yeah. you just play it for the weapons anyway.
Yeah. Just for the kicks. Yeah.
Speaking of playing it for the weapons, I've also been playing Black Ops 6 now that came out.
Yeah, we've both been playing that quite a bit, especially the multiplayer.
Yeah, that's all I've been doing. I want to find a chunk of time to sit down and do the campaign finally because I heard it's great. But the multiplayer is also equally great.
It's really good. It still has some of its COD nonsense, like where you die from behind or something, or
COD timing.
Yeah, COD timing, where it's like you put down your sights at the worst possible second to get killed. But this one feels better than Modern Warfare 3, and I don't know if I like it more than Modern Warfare 2. It's hard to remember if I liked it more than that, but
we spent a lot of time on 2.
We did, but I feel like we spent even more time on Cold War though.
Yeah,
which was previous to that one.
And this is very much like that. It's very arcadey.
Exactly,
compared to the last 2.
Is why I really like it too. But yeah, we've been having a really good time with that one.
Yep.
Yeah. Anything else you've been?
No, I think that's it. Just for I was trying to think. I was like, man, have I really only played Black Ops? But that makes sense.
Well, it's also,
it does take up a lot of time.
This is also a little bit shorter time than what we usually record. Usually it's like maybe once a month. So
there's
that too, where it's like we've kind of been playing the same thing because it's been like 2 weeks since
we have a free minute, we text our buddies and say, hey, get on.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Juan, what have you been diving into?
Well, other than replaying Gunstar Heroes for the 700th time for this episode, I finally 100%ed Tears of the Kingdom, Legend of Zelda game. So I got a Zelda itch. I went back and re-downloaded Majora's Mask, Ocarina of Time, Skyward Sword. So I finished Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. I just started Skyward Sword a couple days ago. I'm the type of guy, I'll replay the same game 60 times. And so this is probably the 4th time I played through Skyward Sword.
Oh my God.
But it's the first time with not a Wii. So I played through it with the Wii a bunch of times.
The Switch port got rid of the motion controls, which is great.
I got to play that now.
Yeah.
No, it's terrific. It's still good. It's still good. But yeah, that's about it. I went through a time where I got into mobile gaming. I hate to say this. And so I was downloading things left and right. And you know how most mobile games are like pay to win?
Yeah.
And so I told myself, I'm not going to be one of those guys that pays to win. Yeah, that lasted like a week. and then they got a ton of money out of me. I won everything. And I was like, oh, that's right. This is why I don't play these games.
That's what happens, though. It's like I can't judge anyone or shame anyone, right? Because for me, I do the same thing with like a fighting game where it's like, oh, they have a new skin, $5 for classic Ermac or something.
But that's how they get you, right?
Of course, inevitably.
It's like, $2 for this, $4 for that, no big deal, no big deal. And then at the end of the month, you're like, wait, who did this?
Are the mobile ones you're playing? Are they the type where you only get a certain amount of lives and then you have to wait for it to?
Bingo.
Yeah. So you're like, no, I don't want to wait. Here's money.
Yeah. Here's money. Give me a quick power up. Give me another life. Like, that sort of thing.
Play now.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow afternoon at 7 p.m. for no reason.
Once I put this down, I'm not going to remember it. So I better play now.
But if you really think about it, it's funny, right? Because you'll drop $60-$70 on a game, for your Xbox, for your PlayStation. And then you'll download some things, as Donnie said, right? You download this skin, that skin. We probably pour a solid 120 to 140 into any given game just on that stuff alone.
Over its lifetime, yeah.
And I just got to say, remembering back to my youth, for example, with Gunstar Heroes, man, they really got us, didn't they? Gunstar Heroes, I spent hours on, had a great time. It was, $40 at the time? Even with inflation, it would have been, $65? Now I'm spending $140 a game. and I want more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's all the replayability factor because it's like me and Deucy always say too. Like there's some games we'll play like Turtles in Time, last 40 minutes, and that was like $80 back then, right? In 1990s money.
Yeah.
And nowadays, like you're blowing $100 on these gold editions, premium editions, or whatever's out there. It's pretty crazy, but they're selling for a reason, right? That's why they continue to do them because people are buying them. They're not just.
Oh yeah, I don't want the audience to get me wrong here. This is not some getting on a soapbox about why we should not buy these games.
Yeah.
I will continue to buy after this podcast. I will probably go buy more games, but just the observation of it.
Yeah. To that point, I was just thinking of how like I didn't buy the what do they call it? The Black Cell edition of Black Ops for the Battle Pass and everything. And then I'm like, who am I kidding? I'm probably eventually going to get it.
It happens. We all just need that one extra push where you put that one little carrot you need just to put you over the edge and buy it.
Yeah, usually it's like a skin of some sort, like a new gun type or a new character.
And that's fine, just spend money on whatever you want. Like if you're playing the game enough to justify it, it's fine. Like even with Warzone, when we originally played it, right, during the pandemic, like we spent hundreds of hours on that, and we spent like $10 because we got the battle pass and kept renewing it, right?
I was gonna say you only had to buy it that first time, and then you earned enough each season.
And then sometimes we'll get that skin that's like $15, and we're like, well, whatever. It's like I've put literally 300 hours in this game. $15 is fine.
They got us when they first put in.
It was Leatherface and Jigsaw, I think, right?
Were those the first? I was gonna say
one of the first ones we got.
McLean and Rambo came after that, huh?
Yeah, it was Cold War, I believe.
Yeah.
I think the first season was Leatherface and Jigsaw were the first big ones.
That's when they get you. Yeah. And I think I'm just trying to picture, because Black Ops 6 takes place in the 90s, like how many 90 stars are we going to get?
I know. It'll be really interesting to see, and which ones we'll end up diving into and buying.
If they have a Jean-Claude Van Damme Street Fighter, like
it's over.
look,
it's over. I'll be buying that day one.
Don's like, I don't have to spend any more money.
That's it.
Just that character.
For the lifetime of this game, I am JCVD as Guile. That's all I need. Yeah. For what I've been playing, so I was playing Zelda Echoes of Wisdom. I've been playing that for like the last month.
Is that good?
It's really good. So it's a very different Zelda game, right? Because you're playing as Zelda. She can't actually, use a sword or anything. Like she has her staff where she summons echoes, because anytime you kill an enemy or there's certain objects you can learn as an echo, and that's now an object you can place in the game. It's sort of like a smaller condensed version of Tears of the Kingdom's Recall, yeah. So it's appears like all the puzzles are oriented around using these objects to either make like a ladder or something, or solve a puzzle by grabbing what you summoned and landing it on the switch. It's really good. I put I think it must have been like 22 hours, 24 to finish it, and there's still stuff that I could have gone through and everything. But I was at a point where I was just kind of rolling through the game. I was ready to end, and you get to that point. But it was really, really good. I definitely recommend out there if they're on the fence, wait for a sale, maybe as much of a sale as it's going to be, because Nintendo, it's like $15 off,
if that. Yeah, that's generous.
But it's a really damn solid Zelda game. I really enjoyed my time with it. Like it was a twist on the formula, and it was really interesting. I think by the end I was getting tired of the combat a little bit, because like the last boss, depending on what summons you have, it could change the difficulty of the game based on that. So it was kind of tedious, even though it was an easy boss. I just didn't have anything else to really fight him with. Like I had so much and only so much useful, right? Because he can bowl over certain things. So by then I was like, it's cool. Like this game was perfect at around 25 hours. I think it's totally solid for that. I'm still diving into Dragon Age: The Veilguard. This has been like one of my biggest surprises this year. I think there's like 3 acts in the game, and I think 19 hours last I saw, and I'm just doing like all the side stuff that comes up. I mentioned it was sort of like a Mass Effect with like a fantasy twist, and that's exactly what it is. Like these 2 elven gods are released into the world. They're basically just going to destroy the realm and put a blight on the world, and you're a rook who has to go all across the realm to help these other characters out. These side characters who all have this sort of common enemy, right, to save the realm. And it's freaking amazing. I've been enjoying the hell out of it. So I wanted you and saw me playing it earlier for a little bit, which was pretty fun.
It looked gorgeous, by the way.
It's a really gorgeous game too. Like the art design here is freaking stellar. And the other game, which we already touched on too, was Black Ops 6. I've also been playing Warzone since that got everything that Black Ops 6 did this week for the Season 1 launch. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, because whenever, Deucy, like whenever there's a new Warzone, it's like they'll take 1 step forward and then 4 steps back, right? Like they introduced some things in the new map that they took away, because it's sort of like, the reverting to what the original map was. there's omni movement, but now it's like it just feels like crazy multiplayer on a giant map. Like there's times where you can't even land and survive for 10 seconds.
Yeah, when you think about it, we mentioned that Cold War, the last Black Ops game, was kind of arcadey, but they never implemented that movement into Warzone.
It was totally separate the whole time.
It still felt like the Modern Warfare 2019, which everybody was happy with because it was, still that very classic map and everything. But now, yeah, I could see how this would be very hectic on the Resurgence mode. But did you do the big map regular mode?
We did both.
Oh, okay.
So Resurgence, the new Resurgence map is Area 99. I haven't learned it because we've died so fast. Like the best we've gotten is like second or third or something like that.
I saw one building.
Yeah, but the game moves so fast, like the pace is so fast, that it's hard to familiarize yourself with it. But it just feels like with this version so far, it just feels like I was thinking about like Warzone in 2020, even 2021. Like this game is so far from what that kind of Warzone was, like that sense of battle royale where there'd be times where you, me, and Randy would be hanging out on the stadium or in a building, just camping, waiting for people to come by because you had limited resources. Like every gun felt like it was deadly. It wasn't just like multiplayer where you just run up on people and mob them and kill them every time. So it's an adjustment. I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, but it doesn't have the best first impression. I'm sure it's just an adjustment period like anything else because the game just feels like a brand new game with all the new movement options, and they got rid of the backpacks. So I have to get used to not hoarding smoke grenades like I usually do.
It was nice to hoard like armor plates and things, but I'm glad that there's no backpack system.
Yeah, I agree. Like in general, I think it would be better for the game because that means that people aren't stocking stuff for the end and just bombing you with kill streaks and lethals and God knows whatever other nightmares. So it's been fun. Of course, it's like we'll see where it lands, but I don't know. I feel like even if I said like, I'll kind of taper off and not play it as much, it won't matter because Verdansk is coming next spring, and that's going to just reel me back in.
Oh, anyway. We're all getting back.
We're all getting on. That's going to be a full-on reunion at that point. Yeah. All right, guys. So I think it's time. Let's talk about Treasure and Gunstar Heroes. Guys, we're back after that little musical interlude from Gunstar Heroes. I'm pretty excited to cover this game. It's very much sort of like a Metal Slug Contra type of game. But Juan, why did you choose Gunstar Heroes for us today?
So let me take you gentlemen back.
Oh, I love stories.
Oh yeah. Let me take you back to a simpler time. Some would say a better time. The early 90s. And this is a time of Terminator.
Yep.
Cliffhanger. Mm-hmm. And really getting your hands on any game you could as a kid. I want to say it was roughly about 1994, early 1994, and I'm gonna give you another name from back in the day, Blockbuster.
Oh
yeah,
did you get warm fuzzies with that one?
I miss it.
That's right.
I did.
And when you would go to Blockbuster on that Friday night, that Saturday night to go get a movie. If you were a kid of a certain age, you would run straight to the video game section. Try to see what they had available, right?
That was, for the longest time, that was the only reason we went to Blockbuster. We never even got movies.
Yeah. Well, if you could convince your parents, well, at least my parents, sometimes they're hard to convince to go up there. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have to ask my dad, mostly.
Exactly. My dad was easy for that, too.
Yeah.
You sure don't want to get a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie right now?
Well, so yeah, exactly. Movies were, everyone could enjoy, but as a kid, you wanted to get a game. And so, browsing through the aisles, Sonic, which already came with the console, some other games, and the cover of Gunstar Heroes features one little dude who I later came to realize was an adult, but in my kid brain was another little kid.
Yeah.
Just going ham. And some bad guys in the background. And of course, the name Gunstar. For 9-year-old me, 10-year-old me, that was the coolest name ever, right? Oh, Gunstar. Awesome. So, immediately grabbed it. Begged my dad to rent this thing. He said no. Negotiated for the better part of 5 minutes about what I would do if he rented this game. And lo and behold, we rented the game. And I got to tell you, gentlemen, Never looked back. From the moment I popped that game in my Genesis till we had to return it 2.5 days later, whatever that was, 3 days later, I was hooked. Fast forward to a few months after that, convinced my dad to buy the game for me.
Was it like a birthday or Christmas or something? Or
I think it was to shut me up.
yeah, okay, that works too.
Or because you'd rented it so much.
Yeah.
You may as well buy it. Yeah. Right, Pop?
Yeah. Like at that point, I think the special occasion was just get this kid off my back.
Yeah.
So fast forward, as I mentioned to you guys, a decade later, and I still own the game, still played it from time to time. My Genesis barely connecting to the TV anymore at this point, you know. N64 is already there. Hearing these new things about these new CD consoles, so on and so forth. PlayStation 1's right around the corner. And sure enough, I forgot about the game. And then the Wii came out.
Oh, yeah.
2 words for you, boys. Virtual console.
One of the greatest things Nintendo ever did, and one of the worst things they ever killed.
Yeah.
And it was there on the Virtual Console. Replayed it another 20 to 30 times. And we'll talk about why this game is so replayable here in a moment. And then everything else is history. I've owned different versions of the game. I owned the 3DS version of the game. As I mentioned, I owned the Switch version of the game.
Was the 3DS like the Virtual Console, or was it an actual like 3D?
No, it was
3D.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, they called it a 3D classic, although
Yeah.
it had never been in 3D, but they ported it, and really one of the formative games of my childhood. If I were to say what are the 5 games that shaped my gaming life and that are my favorites, it's that, Ocarina of Time, GoldenEye, Super Mario 64, obviously big Nintendo guy, and Mortal Kombat 2
Fantastic choices, all 5 of them.
on the Genesis.
Yeah.
Let me be clear about the Genesis because that's the one that had blood.
Yeah. Well, Mortal Kombat 1. Well, both had blood on with Mortal Kombat 2, though.
No, but on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, Mortal Kombat 2 had blood on that version.
I thought it had the gray.
No, that was Mortal Kombat 1.
That was the first one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But nonetheless,
They got their act together.
They
Yeah.
Nintendo finally got their act together.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. But I do love the Sega version of Mortal Kombat 2 as well, because I played that a ton, because I had owned that, and I always rented Mortal Kombat 2 on Super Nintendo. So, you know, it sounds chunkier, and it's a little bit uglier, but I don't care. I love that game. I'm nostalgic for it.
But anyway, yeah. And so now we're here talking about it.
Yeah, thank you. That's a fantastic story to kick us off for Gunstar. All right, guys. Well, I think to get started with Gunstar, we have to talk about Treasure and who they are, because I think they're one of the best developers that, if you know who they are, you know how great they are, but maybe if you're not familiar with them, you might not understand how great they are. So Treasure was an indie Japanese studio that was founded in Tokyo in 1992. This was founded by about 10 people, and the great thing about this company, just right off the bat, is that it's made up of Konami veterans. So this team worked on games like the Simpsons arcade game, which we all know and love. Yeah, they started there. Bucky O'Hare, Super Castlevania 4, and most importantly to Gunstar Heroes, arguably, Contra 3, which was a huge Super Nintendo game, which I think we should probably cover at some point. We haven't done Contra, and I think maybe we'll do a ranker for that one or something.
Oh, yeah, maybe.
That'd be kind of cool.
I don't think I've played 3 as much, but they have the great collection because Konami has put out some great collections recently.
Yeah, and that's always like $4 or $5 too. Like that one is just like the Castlevania one. It's always dirt cheap. You know, it's worthwhile. So that team from Konami had kind of migrated to make their own studio, and really the name Treasure came for the fact that they literally wanted to be a treasure of the gaming industry. And I really think they live up to that name as we get through some of the games they developed before we get into Gunstar Heroes. So the company was founded by President Masato Magawa. He worked at Konami shortly after graduating college, and like I said, he was with the other 9 people who started this company, and they were really sick of doing sequels at this time, because in the early 90s, you guys know as much as I do, like sequels were just a yearly thing. There was a lot of games that went on for like 4 or 5 games. We played all of them.
It's weird. You're talking about the 90s, right? Not like the 2010s and 2020s?
Yeah, exactly, right? People act like it's a new thing, right? But back then, we were dealing with the same thing. So Treasure decided that they wanted to break away from that because they wanted to kind of innovate on games and make games that they thought were fun. So their philosophy to the game development was that they just wanted to create games that they would enjoy, not games that would necessarily be commercially viable or commercially successful. Like they're not looking to be like, like a Madden 20 million seller kind of thing.
That is unheard of.
It's a
these
really
days.
crazy philosophy, right?
Like, I guess you have some independent developers now that put out things on Game Pass or put out things in the Nintendo eShop, but you don't hear about them going, yeah, we're gonna do this. Gunstar is practically like a Konami big.
It feels like a Konami game through and through.
Whereas like independent games these days don't always feel like the big AAA titles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yet again, this is 1993, 1992, and they were in that kind of mindset and philosophy long before really anyone else was. But really, that's sort of like the essence of gaming, right? It's supposed to be something you enjoy and have fun with. And if you're kind of, it's a common criticism I think of modern gaming now. It's where like so many publishers are purposely developing games to be the most successful they can be, right? To milk as much money out of it. Whereas you look at Treasure and they're like, no, like we just want to create what's really fun and something new that you haven't played before or experienced. And if it doesn't make a ton of money, that's fine. We'll make another game that's just as awesome,
Yeah.
So their philosophy was simply to create games that we want to make. Just to reinforce that there. That was said by the president of the company. And Treasure would develop a ton of games throughout their history, like from 1993 there to 2015. Some of the games that they've come out with, there's Dynamite Heady, Guardian Heroes, which is a Saturn beat 'em up, Mischief Makers, Radiant Silvergun, which is a huge shoot 'em up that was only on the Saturn and was ported to Xbox Live in like 2011 or something like that. Sin and Punishment on the N64, Bangai-O, which is one of my favorites. Gunstar Superheroes, which that's a sequel to the game we're talking about today.
Oh, wow.
Advanced Guardian Heroes, Warrior World on the GameCube, Astro Boy, Game Boy Advance, Gradius 5, and Ikaruga. Have you guys had any familiarity with Treasure beyond Gunstar Heroes, or have you played anything besides that? I know, Deuce, you got Mission Makers recently.
Yeah, I haven't played it yet, though. But I have watched it on YouTube and stuff, and it looks really fun. And now I'm making the connection. I didn't at first. I didn't realize it was the same people as Gunstar. Also, what you didn't have listed on here was one that you recently found and showed me was that Tiny Toons game.
That's right. Yeah, Tiny Toons Buster's Bad Dream, I think it was called. That's right. We recently discovered that because I'd seen that on our list when we were doing our Tiny Toons episode, but I didn't look up the game because it's like in the 2000s, a lot of those Game Boy Advance games were kind of unremarkable. And when you look at that video of that game, it looks like a Treasure game through and through.
It looks really fun. I want to track it down somehow.
It looks excellent. It just sucks because I looked it up and the cart is like $100 and it's like 350 complete. And that's because apparently in 2002 was when it was released. It was a UK game, and I guess some publishers somehow got the rights to print them for the US, but it was like a really limited run. So I was like, no wonder I didn't hear about it because there's probably like 5 copies in existence.
They also changed up the title for the US release.
Yeah, I forgot what it was changed to.
It's like just Scary Dreams or something like that.
Yeah, Ghost something. Yeah.
You both never played that game?
No, not for the Game Boy.
For the Game Boy Advance one?
Yeah.
No, have you?
Yeah.
Because it's Treasure?
No, because it was
Tiny Toons.
Tiny Toons.
Oh. Yeah. What did you think of it? Did you enjoy it back then?
Oh, it was a great game.
Yeah.
I wish I had gotten it, but I have to get an emulator to play it now. But it looked really awesome. Like it looked like I said, a treasure game, like a side-scrolling treasure game, like it should.
And not even. I don't remember seeing too much about shooting, but it was very melee oriented.
Yeah, because you could like throw enemies right and summon a buddy.
Right.
Yeah,
That's right.
It looked really cool.
It was fantastic.
That worked out for you then, Juan, because you just wanted it because it was Tiny Toons and you get a little bit of treasure in there too.
Yeah,
it's pretty great.
I played Guardian Heroes. That's good too.
It's really good. So that one, I don't know if it's still available. I think it is on Series X or something. I thought it's one of those backwards compatible games, but it's really good. It's a side-scrolling beat 'em up. That's sort of a spiritual successor to Gunstar Heroes. And it has this weird sort of mechanic where you can jump different planes. Like there's two or three lanes, like the Power Rangers movie game.
Yeah.
Right, on Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Similar to that. And it's pretty rare. It's like $160 like we saw at the game store.
Is it as fast paced as Gunstar?
Not as fast.
Okay.
I do remember that because I played it back when it was on Xbox Live. I remember playing it, and it's really fun, but it's not as fast paced as Gunstar. Gunstar's like crack.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about. Yeah. The game that I probably was most familiar with here was Ikaruga for the GameCube. That's a bullet hell shooter that I was really excited to play, and I got that at launch. It is a gorgeous and great GameCube game, but it is just one of the hardest shoot 'em ups I've played in my life. It is brutal, which is a common theme in some of the Treasure shoot 'em ups. So there you go.
Yeah, I remember when you got that, and it's probably like one of the few games I never borrowed from you. Probably because you told me, "Oh, this is really hard."
Well, I would have guessed too that you probably played it at my house, and you're like, "Yep, don't need it," you know?
Yeah.
That's all it was. And the other game that I played a lot of was Astro Boy on the Game Boy Advance. I think I still have my copy, but that one's worth tracking down, Deucy, because that one is really fun. I have no familiarity with Astro Boy as far as like the comics or the manga or anything like that. Like I just knew it was treasure at the time, which is why I also got Advanced Guardian Heroes or Gunstar Heroes. But Astro Boy is just, I think that's like one of the unsung gems of the Game Boy Advance for sure.
I also recently got Wario World, and I want to try that.
Yeah, I only played that like once when I rented it way back, but I thought that was a cool find because I forgot about that game entirely.
Because that, I mean, it's a treasure game, but it's fully 3D.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks really, really good. I know people were kind of lukewarm to it at the time, but I'm sure it's one of those things where everyone just loves it now because, you know, it's 20 years later and they're like, yeah, it wasn't that bad.
And also, we didn't get any more like Wario
That's
adventuring type games.
We got nothing like that.
He turned into WarioWare, and that was it.
Yeah. All right, so how Gunstar came to be, they pitched it to Konami, and it was ultimately just rejected. They didn't really give a reason why, but you know, after that, they pitched it to Sega under the names Blade Gunner and Lunatic Gunstar, but apparently Sega didn't like the word lunatic.
Oh man.
But yeah, which is really weird. But I guess that's against like 90s things where certain words weren't appropriate for kids and certain were. You know, like Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles in Europe.
Oh, yeah.
Right? That whole gimmick. But before Sega would publish Gunstar Heroes, they kind of gave a challenge to Treasure to develop a game for them because at this time, Treasure hadn't made any games before. This was sort of their, you know, they knew people at Konami, but this was the first instance of Treasure trying to seek out a publisher for their games. They're just like a brand new company with no real lineage. So Sega said, you can develop McDonald's Treasureland Adventure for the Genesis. Have you guys played this one at all? Like, did you rent it? Have you seen this one at all?
I feel like I've seen it on YouTube, maybe. Like,
Didn't even know it existed.
is that the one? Oh no, maybe I'm thinking of a Nintendo game where like there's little golden arches and you have to collect them.
That's what's that? It's called. That's not Globetrotters. It's some name like that. I forgot what it's called. It's like Mac and something. I know what game you're talking about, but this one's different. This one you play as Ronald McDonald.
Oh, okay. Then I do not know that.
Yeah, it looks really cool. Like I don't remember playing this back then. I can't remember if I even saw it for rent or anything. But it's one of those things too where I learned about it as I get older because I'd seen it. And, you know, people were kind of saying like it wasn't that bad of a game because I would have dismissed it now. Like it looks like a McDonald's kids game. Like why would I bother with this kind of thing?
Well, these days they'd probably include it in a Happy Meal.
They would. It'd be a bonus. Yeah. So once. You know, that was their agreement. Sega said, we'll publish Gunstar Heroes, but we need you to develop this game first. So that's what happens. They were developing McDonald's Treasureland Adventure in 1993, and then in the middle of developing that, they were granted approval for Gunstar Heroes. So at this point, again, there's only like, you know, probably 10 to 15 people in this company. They've then split the team in two because their passion project was Gunstar Heroes. Like that's the whole reason they kind of put the studio together and to get things going, right? Is they wanted that to be their debut game, but no one was willing to publish it for them. So they in the middle of McDonald's, they broken the team in two, and then after that point, it was about 9 to 10 months to develop Gunstar Heroes, and they actually had completed McDonald's Treasureland first, but they wanted to hold it back because they wanted Gunstar to be their debut game, which is interesting.
That I would do it the other way around because like, oh, Gunstar, great debut and everything, and your follow up is now McDonald's.
Yeah, right. Like it doesn't make any sense, especially when you compare how different the games are. Like. I'm sure McDonald's is kind of an easier game. You know, it's made for kids. And you go to Gunstar where it's just like balls of the wall difficult on normal. Right?
Yeah.
It's a tale of two different games that are released a month or two apart. Yeah.
Well, I think if you're the company, it's one of those things where McDonald's has all this built-in advertising behind it. If this game fails, Gunstar's never getting released.
Absolutely.
That's true too.
Yeah, that's fair too.
Yeah.
Right. So release Gunstar and then whatever. You know, whatever happens at this point. But if what was it called? McDonald's
Treasureland Adventure. It's a little bit of a mouthful.
Yeah. See, this
like
is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
If that game crashes, Gunstar's never seen the light of day.
Yeah, which is fair. That was probably a contingent thing, right? And they probably were happy with what they saw in the middle development, and that's when they realized, okay, you can make Gunstar Heroes. We think you have something here, right?
Could you imagine that crossover though? Ronald McDonald just guns blazing.
I would love that.
Gunstar.
Yeah. I wish someone would make like a Gunstar ROM hack where one you can alternate between fixed and movement fire, and also if you play as Ronald McDonald or something like
or
that.
Grimace.
You heard that, audience? Some enterprising young fella out there.
Yeah.
We need someone who knows how to ROM hack, make that ROM hack for us. I know you've been thinking about it. We just got to push you over the edge to do it, you know? So the Genesis was their preferred platform, despite them working mostly with Super Nintendo up in this point. So really, before the Genesis, no one had worked on this before. So the reason they chose the Genesis was because the processor was much more powerful than the Super Nintendo's one was, which makes sense because if you guys remember, the whole thing of the Genesis in the early 90s was the blast processing, right?
Yeah.
That whole marketing gimmick, which they made it sound like it was something that was happening in front of you, but it's really just saying like we have a really fast processor. And the Treasure really just felt like they couldn't achieve what they wanted the game to be on the Super Nintendo because it just wasn't, powerful enough to handle that. And I think that's fair because when we get into this game, like there are so many just turbo movements, just like signature Genesis tricks.
Yeah, I mean, I could see when you think about Super R-Type and how that just chugged on the Super Nintendo, and then you look at what Gunstar was doing right off the bat.
It's crazy. Exactly.
Like, nope, this wouldn't have worked.
Yeah. So despite that, though, Genesis did have some compromises and flaws. So it can only display 64 colors on the screen at once, which, again, is like a mind-blowing stat to me when, we look at what games are today and their fidelity, and we're looking at games of yesterday where we have 64 colors on the screen at once. That's the most.
And you can't even really tell with Gunstar. And other Sega games, when they had the limits on the colors and things, you could definitely tell.
Yeah.
With comparing it side by side with Super. But with this one, yeah, it looks beautiful still.
It's a gorgeous game. It's really gorgeous. Yeah. So the backgrounds were initially only going to have 16 colors, and they bumped up to 32. And they also had Treasure is really good, obviously, but they were able to do some tricks with the programming where it's like it would show like there's 3 to 4 layers on the screen at once, even though Genesis could only handle 2. However, they did that. I'm sure it's some engineering feat that they figured out. Or like they did things where a lot of the bosses in here, they're pretty big, but they have a lot of movements in their limbs because they're all made up of different sprites, which is a technique we'd see much later in like Game Boy Advance for Castlevania games and whatnot, and even some of the later Castlevania games. But they did that because that was easier to scale the sprites and and make them move at a certain animation speed. And then they realized that they could kind of cheat the big boss sprites without having to make them giant sprites by just making them multi-limbs. So it made sense to chop them up in individual parts, and also made more dynamic bosses too. So the design of this game was really approached with an anything goes mentality, and I think you can tell that here when we get through all the levels in this game. Like they just threw everything at the wall and everything stuck because there's a lot of variety in this game, especially for when you compare it to games like Contra and whatnot, which is just shoot through the levels. Contra 3 at least. You might have those levels where it's like over the top down view. I don't know if you remember those, right? Where you twist around.
Yep.
But Gunstar just does all that and more, but on the Genesis, which was supposed to be less powerful than Super Nintendo, arguably.
I know you can choose your levels in the initial phase, and all of them felt very different.
Yeah.
Different enemies and everything. Like you said, Contra was always very similar. Like the lowest level were all the same looking bad guys, men usually. And then later on you would fight aliens and things. But like in this one, each level had its own set of enemies.
Everything's really distinct.
Well, so actually that's the brilliance of this game. And so you're misremembering it. Almost every level had the exact same enemies. What it did was every level was so different than the level before it that the gameplay felt different. It was all the same little henchmen, for lack of a better term, were about 80 to 90% of the enemies. Then you had the other 10 to 15% little floaty things that would throw bombs at you. And that was it. That was the vast majority of all regular enemies were that. And then there's a space level, which we can talk about later. But the way they did it was, in one level, you are running through a traditional Contra style level with trees and jumping up and down on platforms and boxes. And then the very next one, you're
riding on that little sled thing, or
you're riding on a sled thing.
Yeah.
And then the next one, you the character have to make your way up, not a mountain, but rather keep jumping up on platforms higher and higher to keep pace with a ship.
Oh yeah,
and then you eventually end up on a ship. And then in the video game level, the board game level, you're in individual rooms fighting off the enemies. So it does this really neat trick where the enemies are generally the same, but you're fighting them in different ways. And then, of course, the classic, for those of you who have never played Gunstar Heroes, I'm sure most of you have played one of the Ninja Turtles games, the classic going really fast on a speeder.
Yeah.
So there's a level like that in Gunstar. Again, same enemies, but now you're fighting them in the Turtles style, going left to right super fast.
Yeah, that is true. Like, no level really repeats itself in
No,
this.
and that's what I love about this game, because I hadn't played through this game in a long time, which we'll get to. And like when I was replaying it last night, I just ran right through, and I was like, God,
Yeah.
what a great 45 minutes to an hour that was, just blazing fast. It's just such a tight game, and everything it doesn't have time to get monotonous, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the right thing is so great about this game.
Even if I died, I didn't feel defeated. I was like, okay,
Yeah,
I won't do that again.
What's beyond there. Yeah. So we'll get into the release and some reviews, and then we'll get to our goodness here. So this game was actually almost rejected by Sega of America until a producer there named Mac Senior, I think it was, or Senor. He was the last of 13 producers who passed on this game. So there's 12 previous to him who just said, no, we don't want to bother with this. And the suspicion is that they thought the sprites were too small for this game. Like, they just felt like that the thing of in the fashion of the time was like these giant big sprites and like these big, just big games. But he saw something in this game that I guess a lot of people didn't. And fortunately for him, he's the only reason it was actually released, because he was to approve it.
So there's a story behind this, and it goes like this. And who knows, these stories, they take a life of their own over the years. Here's the story behind this. All the other producers, as you said, tried the game. All of them said no. This guy had the most respect in the company at the time. I guess in their previous work at the other company, this guy had been a big deal, so everyone respected this guy. So he really was the last chance.
Yeah.
Everyone has summarily rejected the game. He plays it. He plays it for no more than 15 minutes. And the story goes, he puts his controller down and says, "Boys, this is the game of the year."
Oh,
He declared.
weights.
Yeah, he declared that not even halfway through the game. He just said, "Yep, nope. Not only are we doing this, this is going to be the game of the year."
It's pretty incredible, because like I said, I think let's say he wasn't in that production line, that review line, would this game have ever come here? We probably would have heard about this decades later. Maybe imported it. Maybe it would have been released somewhere.
Like Sin and Punishment on N64.
On N64, yeah, that was exclusive to Japan by then.
Like, people gave it rave reviews, and we finally saw it on the was it the Virtual Console? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was one of the cool things I think it was even on the Wii Virtual Console. Like, that was a huge deal when Sin and Punishment came here, because it was in English, there was English voice acting, and yet it never reached here.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. So, thankfully for him, this game got released, and Sega actually underestimated the demand first in Japan and the US. So in Japan, they only had an initial shipment of 10,000, which quickly sold through. And Sega of America saw that, and they actually requested a similarly small print run for whatever reason. Ended up selling over 70,000 copies in Japan alone, and then 200,000 overseas. That seems like really small numbers these days, but that's a pretty big success for a console game on the Genesis back then. In addition to that, there was a Game Gear port that I want to talk about real quick. I didn't get to play this because I just discovered it existed. It looks, okay. I don't know if you guys had a chance to see the video linked on there.
Oh, no.
So it's made by M2, and they're really one of the more notable port and emulation studios that Sega uses a lot. They're the ones who did the 3D Classics versions that you're talking about, Juan. And they most recently did the Haunted Castle remake on the Castlevania Dominus collection. They have just such a great lineage of porting Genesis and Sega games in general on the new hardware and just making near flawless emulation. So they were tasked with developing the Game Gear port of Gunstar Heroes after they saw the success of Gauntlet. I guess Sega really liked the Gauntlet port that they had done. And for some reason, this was only in Japan. It looks like a smaller version of Gunstar Heroes. It actually looks kind of cool, but also looks like it's a Game Gear game that's kind of like Contra with a tiny screen. So I have a feeling it's probably way more difficult than it needs to be. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. It was only released in Europe and Japan from what I saw, though. And it was released in 1995. Some review scores here. So we usually get GamePro, EGM, and Nintendo Power, but obviously this was a Sega-only release.
Yeah.
So we're not going to talk about Nintendo Power in this instance. GamePro reviewed this in issue 55, February 1994. These are all out of 5. They gave graphics of 4, sound of 4, control of 5, fun factor 5. They praise the wild variety and imagination of levels and bosses, and they know the amount of weapon combos and hand-to-hand moves. And they thought the graphics and speed were great, but thought the character sprites weren't sharp and hard to distinguish from your friend in co-op, which that's probably a fair criticism because this game gets pretty crazy with just single player with all the stuff happening in the screen at once, especially in the later levels.
I was impressed with myself for keeping track of myself on the on the screen.
That's also fair.
I guess it helped that I was playing in the Switch handheld, so the screen's like right in my face.
Yeah.
And I didn't do co-op. I bet I would have gotten confused then too.
That's what I think, because I haven't played this co-op ever, and I imagine, have you played this co-op one at all? Did you play it like that?
I have played it
Do you
co-op
recall what the
numerous
experience was
times.
like?
Awesome. So it is wild. So you have to remember, there's no friendly fire.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
So even
Thank goodness.
So so even if you kind of lose yourself for half a second, by the time you and your partner are kicking ass, you go, okay, there he is. That must be me. All right,
Yeah,
good.
getting the flow of each other.
Yeah,
that mental synergy.
I would imagine if I lost track of myself, I would just hold down the fire button still.
Yeah, and I'd say force you for this game. There's not that many bottomless pits you can fall into like Contra, so it's actually, I'd imagine co-op is really just chaotic because you can't see where you really are on the screen versus just, falling to your death because your buddy jumped too high or something.
Oh
you know?
yeah.
EGM also reviewed this, issue 52, November 1993. This was their game of the month, which was no surprise. It scored 4 9s out of 10. So that's a really solid score. They said the cart represents the fact that the Genesis can still beat out the competition. Again, this is like 1993, so the Genesis wasn't, on a downward spiral or anything, but Saturn was already being talked about. That was coming out within the next year or two, right?
When was Sonic 3? Oh,
it was this year.
okay, yeah.
Actually around this time, so just to name a few games that came around there was like Aladdin that came out, Sonic CD, Sonic 3, Incredible Crash Dummies, a game I played a lot of as a kid. I don't know about you guys. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Tournament Fighters, which we talked about in one of our episodes. That was a fantastic game, especially on Super Nintendo. But getting back to the EGM review, they said it was one of the most intense and best looking action games they've ever played. They thought the animations were strong and bosses were well done, and some were completely surprised and impressed at how great the game was overall. I guess this kind of came out of left field for them. And they also thought that the music and sound effects were absolutely killer. So, fellas, I think these reviews are pretty much on the mark. I can't say I disagree with either of them, especially as far as their scoring.
I would have on GamePro. I would have bumped the graphics up maybe 4.5 or 5.
Yeah, this game is a gorgeous Genesis game in 1993. Yeah, it's really good. But all right, let's get into the game, I guess. So, fellas, where do we want to start? Do we want to go break down level by level? Talk about our favorite levels here. One, what do you think about Gunstar Heroes and what makes it so great?
I think that I've been praising this game all day, but I think the one thing we haven't talked about, which was unique at the time, was the weapon system.
Yes.
Yeah.
So before you even started the game, it asked you two things. One is, how do you want to shoot? Do you want to run and gun, or do you want to be able to stand in one spot and shoot in 8 different directions? That by itself gives the game so much replayability. It's so much fun to play it different ways. If you are in co-op, do you both want to go one way? Do you want to go half and half? Great stuff. So that's the first question to ask you. The second question to ask you is what kind of weapon that you like. It comes with 4 main weapons. Fire, which hopefully is self-explanatory. It's basically a blowtorch.
Yeah, it's just a nice flamethrower with some nice heft to it.
Yeah.
That's right. A chaser, which is basically little. They call them little lasers, but think of them as little ninja stars that go after your enemies. You fire in whatever direction, they will find the closest enemy and go try to kill it. Electricity, for lack of a better term, laser beams. Think of it as Star Wars. Laser beam shooters, just shooting off in whatever direction you're shooting in. And last but not least, for you Contra fans, basically just giant bullets.
Yeah.
And I think
big old pea shooter.
Yeah.
And I think they call it plasma in the game.
Force is what it's called.
Force, that's right. So that in and of itself is already really cool. And then Gunstar Hero just does the thing that blew my little 10-year-old mind, and even to this day I think is one of the greatest mechanics in all games, and it says, no, you can actually carry 2 of these ammunitions at the same time and combine them.
That's the key, because Contra, now you can do the carrying 2, but you still don't really combine them, I don't think.
You can't combine them, and even Operation Galuga, you can sort of get rid of one, right? You can hold L2 and it gives you like a boost or a specific boost to that weapon, but you can't combine them like you could in Gunstar.
The combining thing was great when I found that out. This.
And Treasure also mentioned that too, right? That was in their design. It's like they wanted to make the weapon combo system available to players so that they have multiple ways to get through a level or find something that suits them, right? And they figured that if you had all these weapon combos, you'd be much more encouraged to go through the game more and more because you have more ways to beat the game.
And depending on which level, the different combos. But I got to tell you, boys, if you kind of listen to the 4 options that you had, in my mind, the overpowered option was always the chaser.
Yes.
Right, for a side-scrolling shooting game, the idea that your ammo would find whatever direction the enemies were in was already just so overpowered. And then you combined it with something else to give it a little heft. If you haven't played this game for your first playthrough, I cannot recommend enough Chaser with Lightning.
100%.
Which is basically a cheat code.
It's broken.
It basically is. Imagine again if a stormtrooper could aim.
Yeah.
Is basically the Chaser with Lightning is just hold down the button and that laser beam will go find every enemy on the screen.
And if you hold the button after it finds its target, it will just like hover over the enemy until it's dead.
It does damage over time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was by far the weapon I used to get through last night because I was watching a show while I was playing this. And it is just like the most broken weapon combo because I was just running through holding the trigger. And unfortunately, I chose fixed shot. I was going to ask you guys too, are you a fixed shot person or are you like run and gun?
So I chose fixed shot because I'm more familiar with like Super Metroid and you can shoot in all 8 directions. There was only one boss, I think, in this where I was like, man, I wish I had the run and gun. But every other time, I seem to stay alive, especially with Chaser, because you stand still and then it'll hit everything that comes at you.
So I'm, for lack of a better term, an expert at this game. So I am all run and gun because as I'm shooting, I immediately go into melee and then right back to shooting and then right back to melee, back and forth across the screen. I mean, I'm a maniac out there. I have no use for standing still, my boys.
Yeah.
I also didn't realize there was melee in this until about the 3rd level.
Oh my God.
When I accidentally bumped into a guy and chucked him across the screen, I was like,
crazy because the melee is really good in this game too.
There are times where I've challenged myself to get through a level by just using them as weapons against them.
Nice.
So I don't shoot. I just throw them at each other and try to survive. It's the best.
My combo of choice was 2 chasers because you get these homing stars and they circle your body if there's no enemies on the screen until one finally shows up and then boom, they shoot out.
Yeah, it's like a little shield.
Yeah.
I did use that one a little bit, yeah. But I defaulted to the lightning chaser because it was just stupidly broken. I had to beat this game on easy though, full disclosure, because I did on normal, like I got through like the first couple levels and I didn't know the lightning chaser combo then, right? So that was the other thing, is like if I had known I probably got through normal. But it's a pretty tough game overall, which, I think it's totally fair, but I guess that's the whole thing. It's like you're encouraged to go through with these weapon combos and find the best way through because you also find drops in the level too. So, if you're not using Lightning Chaser to cheese the game, you might have another thing that might be appropriate for the situation.
I've played many different versions of this ever since Juan introduced me to it. And this most recent time, I think it was the first time I turned it down to easy. And I finally got all the way to the last boss. I think I died and then I had to like stop for dinner or something. So I haven't beaten it yet. But it is definitely the furthest I've gotten in the game, and it was really quick. I was surprised with that. Like, I didn't even intend to speed run, quote unquote, but like, it was just you got through the level pretty easy. The boss was insane and fun, and then you were looking forward to the next boss. You were like, I want to see what happens next.
Yeah, and this game, so the format is you have 4 levels you can start with at once because the whole story of this game, at least in the US version, is that Colonel Red is out to get these 4 gems, and it summons like this.
Colonel Red, you mean M. Bison?
Yeah,
he's basically M. Bison. He looks exactly like M. Bison. It's dead on.
So, quick fun fact.
He looks like a fancy M. Bison.
Yeah.
Like, hello.
He's like the really rich. Yeah, there you go.
quick fun fact.
The charismatic Bison.
Yeah.
So going back to when this game was approved, they had one thing that they wanted to change on the game. And that is, they said one of the characters looks too much like Hitler.
Yes.
And sure enough, because he's wearing that outfit with the hat and he had his little Hitler mustache. So Treasure's answer is to remove the Hitler mustache and then make his outfit red. So basically they turned him from Hitler to M. Bison.
Yeah.
Who's also a dictator, so it made sense.
And yeah. I mean, the reviewers are correct that the sprites are a little small, so I can't imagine what they did to make him look like Hitler because his little mustache would be like 1 pixel square large.
Well, that's all they need. It's like, as long as it's implied.
Because the outfit was there, right?
Oh, okay.
Hitler
Yeah.
with the hat and the full.
I think it's
black with the red
implying
armband.
what it is. Exactly, right? It's like one of those things where it's like if a parent had seen that, they would probably notice, where the kid may not know at the time. Who knows if they did, but It's just the implication of Hitler.
At least you're kicking his ass.
That's true.
It's like Wolfenstein. You're shooting him dead.
Yeah, and Wolfenstein had its own fair share of people screaming at it too.
Yeah.
But at the same time, who cares?
Well, since we're talking about the characters, can we talk a little bit about the plot of the game?
That's what I was going to need to. Yeah.
Which I think is just so funny. So it's two different plots if you're playing the Japanese version or the American version. And I'll never understand why in the American version they thought they had to change it, because the Japanese version of this thing is awesome. Basically,
Usually is.
Basically, at some point in the future, some conglomerate company creates this doomsday device called gold and silver, and it basically looks like a 1990s Frankenstein's monster. Right? Has the weird hair. It's an artificial being. It, for whatever reason, is wearing Aladdin pants and what seems to be sneakers and a crop top of some kind. So so they build this thing to essentially eradicate different cities around the world. That's not explained why exactly, but so this thing's going around terrorizing the planet Earth that we're on. And the Gunstars, as they're known, our main protagonists, find a way of stopping this creature by essentially killing it and taking away its power source. These 4 gems that end up becoming the little MacGuffins that you earn throughout the levels. Mm-hmm. Well, the best part is they basically defeat this creature, seal it on the moon. They themselves go into stasis. Remember, it's the future, so they can go into cryogenic stasis. Fast forward 10,000 years later, or whatever, new mankind civilization rediscovers gold and silver through a prophecy, which is, again, just the people that created him basically throwing something out there about resurrect him and good things will happen. People believe it. And now you have this game where the gold and silver is being resurrected. Real badass.
It's pretty mature.
Yeah, it's
and straightforward.
Yeah, it's a story about man's hubris and it's because these are humans from Earth and their willingness to destroy themselves for total control. Then, for whatever reason, you fast forward to the quote unquote American plot. And now it's not set on Earth. It's on a planet called G9, mm-hmm. And it has even less explanation.
Yeah.
Right. So now we're on a planet. The Gunstar. They're still called the Gunstars. The Gunstars are the heroes of that planet G9. They look after planet G9, and Gold and Silver is now just a random alien from deep space that comes to G9 to try to steal its resources. Let me tell you why this makes no sense. So in the game, every level that you play, you defeat the boss and you earn one of those little crystals, as I said before. But at the end of the game, what brings the android to life is the crystals.
Oh, yeah.
So how could the android have come from deep space to kill us all if he didn't exist until it's this whole chicken and egg.
There's a little bit of continuity there.
Yeah.
A little bit of continuity breakage.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, the first version also kind of doesn't make sense because the whole point of the evil organization is to get the crystals to resurrect the creature, but they already had them, right? The Gunstars have to go get them from them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
That means they already had the crystals, so why didn't they just...
They're holding them. It's like the hellfish. They're trying to get together, right? Because they have to get to the core as well.
Yeah. And in this one, don't they... So the Gunstars get the crystals from the enemy, but then the enemy goes ahead and kidnaps somebody and holds them ransom for the crystals again.
Yeah.
Like you said, they already had the crystals the first time.
And now they got them back.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just... So I'll give it... Treasure made an amazing game. We're going to talk about some of the other choices they made that are brilliant. But the overall plot, they just dismissed it a little bit.
It's a little loose. But I'll give them credit for including cutscenes in this game because they aren't... there's not many cutscenes. Like there's an opening one... There's some story bits after you beat a level, like you kind of go like your hub before you can select a level, and then you're told like what's next or anything like that, or like you have to go rescue somebody. So there is cool that they have like this, these cutscenes that kind of add this narrative to it, even though it's still a pretty loose story because it's really just the beginning and the end, and maybe some text in the middle to explain to bridge you over to the end.
The one part I didn't like, and I didn't even know about that backstory, was how easily they give up the crystals as ransom. I'm like. Make the enemy like punch me or something.
Yeah, they basically just walked on in and said, "Hey, we're gonna kidnap her."
Yeah.
It's like, oh, well, here's the crystals. I just got through
Please
4
don't.
levels. Yeah.
Well, to be fair, she's their sister.
Yeah.
So they're not all just random friends.
No, no.
No, of course.
But it's still,
funny
it
they
was
just
so
walked
easy.
on in.
Yeah.
They just say, "Give us the crystals. Here you go."
Yeah.
That's really what it was. And then you have to go back to get them. But that leads into like the end of the game too, which it turns things on its head, which is a really fantastic sort of, I guess we'll call like Act 3, or I don't even want to call that side.
One of my favorite parts of the end part is when you're going through, like, I guess you could say it's the boss rush, and you're seeing it from the view screen of the enemies.
Yes.
And every time you beat one, the other guys are like, and then they go off to the side and they're like, okay,
Yeah.
my turn, I'll do it.
So before we get to that, because I really think we need to talk about that whole end sequence and how the game turns into like a shoot 'em up. And also for me, I'll talk about how I feel like there's a lot of treasure DNA for obvious reason in this game that also influenced later games. Like you could see some themes that are directly inspired from Gunstar Heroes enemies or some of the art it has in here. But the levels in here, so each level has its own boss. Each boss is drastically different than the previous boss. And
Yeah.
they're all kind of these wildly different things. Like in the first level, you fight like this giant plant thing, like almost like a poison ivy vine that's just flopping around in the air, which is kind of funny. There's one level where you fight a transforming mech that's on the minecart level, which was just an insane boss rush of its own. There's like 3 forms there.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that. I actually did that level last, and I'm like, it feels like this level should have been last. The way you have to keep going at that guy, and the way you can go from like ceiling to floor, and then from left to right because the level keeps
It's
changing.
really incredible.
Yeah.
So let me tell you guys, that level changes based on the difficulty.
Oh.
So that final boss, you defeat 3 of his forms on easy.
That's what it was, yes.
5 of his forms you have to
Oh,
defeat
God.
on medium, and also he's called 7 Force. You have to defeat all 7 of the forms.
My
on
goodness,
hard.
I did not know about that.
And the corresponding HP
Yeah.
reflects that.
Yeah.
I thought something was up because you fight him in that level, and then in the later boss rush, he changes into different forms, and I'm like, I'm betting you, like, the forms are kind of
noticed that
random.
too.
Like,
I thought it was randomized, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it is randomized if you only do 3 or 5.
Yeah.
But if you do all 7, it's
Yeah, you'll
all
see them
7.
all. Yeah. And that boss on its own is pretty incredible because it transforms into so many different forms that are all pretty different from each other. Like there's one that's like this winged eagle kind of thing, like a bird. There's like this thing with like a tail, like a mace tail.
Oh, yeah.
And it just looks incredible. In this game, again, like I can't understate how fast it goes because I think this is just a Prime Genesis trick with the blast process thing that we'll call again. But this game is just 100 miles an hour all the time.
this goes back to what you said about their idea of anything goes. They said, we want all of these different types of bosses. Well, let's make them all one guy.
Yeah, exactly. They combine whatever ideas into one, and it works.
Well, let's quickly just recap the types of levels here. You have your regular Contra-style jungle fight. You have going up, again, to keep up with a flying ship that's going up high, so you have to be on side platforms, jumping up and killing enemies. You are sliding down a pyramid, basically, killing enemies.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You are doing the one we just talked about in the subway, which is basically the Ninja Turtles going sideways. You have a board game level where you literally throw dice
I love that level so much.
and land on different things. After you finish all of these, you then start the end sequence, which includes a random space level.
Yep.
It's a full-on side-scrolling shoot 'em up.
Yep.
Completely different than what you played before in the last 4 or 5 levels.
Yeah, and you're just on a ship now, and you have power. Or you don't have power ups. You still use your 2 weapons, but that's the one time you see completely different enemies. Then you do another traditional this time boss type side scroll Contra when you're trying to infiltrate the enemy base. Then you do the boss rush, which Deucy talked about, where the bosses are watching you on a screen, and then you have to defeat them one by one. As you defeat them, they talk to each other and say, okay, you're up next.
Yeah.
And then finally, after all of that, you then face off against the final boss, which, again, for lack of a better term, it's the boss is running at you, but not really. And you're dodging attacks and just all of this in one game. It's almost, to your gentleman's points, it's almost like someone was pitching all this to their boss and go, so we could do this, we could do this, we could do that, or we could do this, but maybe we could do this and possibly do that. And the boss just looked at him and go, yes.
Yeah.
That's all he needs.
He came in like, there's no bad ideas, everybody.
that Key and Peele sketch.
Yeah.
Gremlins 2. Give me your ideas. They're all good.
Yeah, I think that's what really makes this game stand out, even above Contra in most cases. Like I know Contra has like its own lineage, and people are so fond of that, but it feels like Gunstar Heroes is more of like the cult hit game, right? There's like a bit of a cult following under it.
Yeah.
But it's not really held in the same regard as Contra for whatever reason. I'm really surprised about it because I would argue a lot of this game has more variety than Contra.
Well,
for sure.
I'll tell you why. Advertising.
That's also fair too. Yeah.
Right? So this game got zero advertising in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Right? It might have been reviewed in some publications, but there were never any commercials. Back in those days, no newspaper type things, no magazine.
And, well, like you said, Konami was big on sequels at the time, so Contra kept getting, like, numbered entries.
It did,
and,
yeah.
Or at least Contra in the title so you knew. Whereas this, all of its sequels were sort of spiritual successors.
Yeah, there's nothing really connected to the other ones.
Well, there's another
except
one.
for like the hero's
Arcade.
name.
Right? There's no arcade version of
That's
Gunstar
true.
Heroes.
No, this would be a prime for an arcade, this type of game. Even though it would be a quarter muncher, it'd be so perfect for a co-op arcade game.
But my point is, no one discovered it through arcades. You discovered it one of two ways. Either you got lucky like me and there happened to be a copy of it at your local Blockbuster, or you talked to someone like me and I said, hey, play this game. It's amazing. But, so it just hit me right now as we're recording this podcast why this game is the way it is. Okay, I'm going to give you a scenario, both of you here. Let's say you decide to start your own gaming company, the two of you. And you think you're going to be successful, but you're not sure you're going to be successful. And so this is your one shot, right? They promised you can make this game. They will fund this game. They will release this game. And you had all these ideas for all these games you wanted to make. But this is your one shot.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Would you not just go, F it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to.
Yes,
have to.
I would like to make a game that's a giant board game where different. I would like to make a space shooter. I would like to make a traditional Contra game. But who knows if you're ever going to get a chance? Screw it.
Yeah.
It all goes in this one.
And again, it ties back to Treasure's philosophy of they're just making games that people can enjoy, and that's what this game does. Like it's just like I said, everything thrown at the wall and everything stuck. It wasn't like certain ideas rolled off and like there's maybe a few things you can nitpick in here. I can't really think of one immediate. I would say, I don't know. There's not really anything negative about this game that I can truly say is sort of like something that would affect the game's enjoyment 31 years later, right? Because that's the other thing too is like I can nitpick for 2024 terms, but it's still an excellent game all throughout.
I would say, I don't know if this is a nitpick or not, because this is very true of the time. But like when a death is very detrimental to you. That's
true because you have 100 hit points of health to start out, and you can't get health pickups to increase that. Like I was up to like 200 at one point.
Yeah,
but yeah, you only have one life basically, one shot, and you have to start either the section or the level over after.
Yeah, I was doing the boss rush thing towards the end, and I've been doing the save states because it's on the Sega Switch Online app. But one time I just decided to see what it would be like if I was playing it on the old hardware. So I died and I continued, and it was like way back at the beginning of towards the last level. I'm like, that is a long way back. Yeah. Let me reload.
Yeah, I'd say that, the only thing I could think of really, and this is even the fault of Gunstar necessarily, it's just the Sega hardware, right, or the controller, I should say. I do wish that there was a fourth button, or we at least have 6-button support, where one button could be dedicated to either fixed or running gun shooting.
Oh, to switch,
on the fly, right? Yeah, kind of like Contra would later do, where you could stand stationary by holding L or R wherever it was, or you could move running gun if you're not holding that. But again, that's
the 3D version has that.
Oh, the 3D.
Nice.
Oh, wow, that's a great enhancement on its own.
Wow, yeah.
Jeez. The thing that sucks is that I'm pretty sure the eShop is gone for that. So
oh yeah,
I don't know if it's still available on the 3DS.
Was it ever physical?
I don't know. I know they released some 3D classics. I don't know if Gunstar was on it, though. I should check. That'd be a good thing. I would love to check that version out because this game was not developed with 3D in mind, right? That was the other thing. I read a little bit about the 3DS port, and they basically had to not hack it, but they had to develop a way to do 3D on it. And from what I had read, it's pretty impressive, and it looked really great.
Or is it still sprites, but then they add like a background?
It just I'm not sure how they did it, but yeah, that's the idea. Is like it's more like parallax scrolling, right?
Yeah.
So you see more of the layers and pop out like the 3DS does. So I have to check and see if it's even available because I would love to play this version. Otherwise, it'll be like, I guess, an emulator and throw it on a cart in your 3DS, which would be a lot of work. Or play it if Juan brings his over. Yeah. I don't know. So I think a couple things I want to talk about here is the Dice Palace, which maybe it's granted, like all these levels are noble for one reason, but Dice Palace is perhaps one of the most unique of the entire game. It's like Deucy mentioned before, it's just a board game, which is incredible. Like you're just playing this run and gun shooter for most of the game. And now to get to this final boss section, you roll a die. It only gives you choices from 1 to 3. And then each of these spaces will have like, there's either an item or you have to do a boss fight. And the bosses might be bosses you fought previously, or it might be totally new bosses, like this weird jelly looking thing. And there's one that was like a happy clown face, which I don't know if you guys noticed, but for me, it looked pretty impressive because it looked like a Star Fox's 3D with that effect they did.
Well, I don't think I got that.
You didn't? It has like these triangles and like the red clown nose. Like I'm sure Juan knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it moves from left to right, like meaning its face moves left to right.
It's
like,
almost
that's
like
what he's talking
Andross.
about. This, yeah,
in
like
Star
Andross.
Fox.
Yeah,
It's really interesting.
I was going to ask if it only gave the illusion of randomness, like based on difficulty, would you be rolling more ones at a harder level so you hit more of the spaces?
I know there's some randomization because I was curious about that because I was like, there's that go back space where it's like right before the final spot where it'll literally take you to the beginning of the board. And I was curious, like, well, let me see if I just do a save thing if it is actually random or if I'm supposed to hit that. And obviously it is randomized because when I rolled it that time, I got like 2. And I was like, of course I did. So I loaded the save things. Like, I guess it's not random because I got 1 after or whatever, But I'd be curious if normal, hard, and I think there's even expert.
Yeah, I haven't noticed a difference in the dice.
Yeah, because I got to the end part and I saw that little death square right at the end. I'm like, uh-oh. But I happened to get a 3 right on the dot, and it moved me right past and finished the level, and I'm like, oh, thank God. But then I was like thinking, okay, to get there, and I needed a 3 exactly, I wonder if that was predetermined, or if I just got lucky on every roll going around the board.
I mean, it's also not that bad. So if you do land on that spot and you keep playing, all the spots that you cleared stay cleared.
Oh, okay.
So then you might even get lucky and get all the way around the board without even having to do anything again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's one of the coolest levels in the game because it's just you don't expect it. It just kind of throws you into this, and it's almost like its own separate Mario Party minigame in a way, right? Like it's kind of a twist on that, but much more deadly because most of the spaces are a boss fight, and some of the bosses range. I don't know how it's randomized or anything, but some of the bosses could be pretty damn tough all over again.
I feel like, well, because I was on easy mode, I got sort of an easy path. There were 2 spaces in a row where all it was just changing your weapons, getting a health and changing your weapons.
Yeah, the item spots.
And that was 2 rolls in a row, and I'm like, wow, that was nice.
That's nice. It worked out. Yeah. And the other level that I thought was really amazing that we kind of covered was the shoot 'em up level that leads into the whole final battle. The reason that's significant to me because as I'm playing through this game, like I said, I'm starting to connect how it makes sense. You see some of the influences in future Treasure games. Like the shoot 'em up level is obviously very much like Ikaruga or Project Sylphid or Gradius 5. The green mech, I forget the name one. I'm sorry. I don't know if you know his name either. The green mech looking guy.
The one that changes, or
Seven Force. Seven Force. He looks almost identical to the mech you play as in Bangai-O. And I think there's some connections to Mischief Makers 2 I don't know if there's a board game in there as well. But I think that's the thing. It's like you could see Treasure's signature style and their signature flair throughout most of their games in one way or another. And it's all rooted in Gunstar Heroes. Like you see a lot of these ideas from their future games in this release here. It's really incredible.
So that second to last level, the last shoot 'em up section of the game, what I love about it is it's unlimited. Right? There isn't a finite amount of enemies. So if you stay in one spot, you will just get enemies for as long as you stay in that spot. So sometimes, for fun, I'll let the screen build up as much as it can load, and then we go. And then we start shooting. Yeah. Like I'm just running around trying not to get hit. Let as many enemies spawn as possible, and then it's like, okay, let's play.
I was noticing that in the Contra level, for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
And I had, like I said, the double chaser, so I just had the stars circling around me. And because I have fixed shot, I wasn't really making progress because enemies were constantly spawning in all 8 directions. And I was fine with that because my chasers were going to all of them, but I was noticing that it felt like an early Call of Duty where you have to reach a certain point for them to finally let you progress.
Yeah, exactly. It was almost like a scripted event point. Where,
Yeah.
yeah,
It was
you had to
just-
kill just enough.
I was like, I'm decimating the population here with
Yeah.
just standing still, and they're constantly coming after
Well,
me.
I think, and even at the last level, when you get there, it says, what is it, destroy them all or kill them all?
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, if the game wasn't going 100 miles before, now it's going 150 miles because you're at that last point and it's trying to make this the most frenetic thing you've ever played in your life because, you have to stop this from happening. It's really incredible that just doing that alone kind of connects the narrative and also adds to like the variety that you said, Juan, where it's like you're fighting mostly the same enemies without maybe the exceptions like the sprites are kind of colored differently or whatever. But there's so much going on in the levels just beyond what they look like and everything else, all the tricks it's throwing at you that you really barely notice that there's only like a handful of enemy types more or less in the game.
Yeah.
And then I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up my kind of favorite boss, which is at a certain point you fight this roided up general dude. And
Oh, he throws you around.
And
Yeah.
is his name Orange?
yes,
Yeah.
Orange. And you're on this plane that's in the air, and you're on the wings, and basically it's just a one-on-one fight. But what I love about this boss is, unlike other bosses that, they come right at you to try to get you, or they have some kind of weird flying pattern. So what this guy does is, as he walks towards you, presumably to try to kill you, to beat you up, every 3 steps he just flexes.
Oh, yeah.
And there's no rhyme or reason. It's not like he's powering up or he needs to, do this for some other reason. Nope, he just like takes his time and flexes. And the best part is as you're playing, you're thinking, oh, this guy's never going to get me. He stops every 3 steps to flex. I'm just going to stay away from him, shoot him. And then when he gets close to me, and yet somehow in the 20 years that I've been playing this game, he's never not gotten me.
Yeah.
Like I'm this slow guy that stops to flex before he even gets near you, and he's gotten me every freaking time. I've
He's
never
got that reach.
Yeah, I was discovering his patterns early on, and there was that part. I was like, I'm getting free hits in because he's just like not coming after me. And then I also dropped down and hung from the wing, and I'm like, well, now he's really not going to come down and get me. He came down and got me.
Yeah. It really does kind of subvert your expectations. Like, he won't reach here, right? He's not going to grab me out, And then he does, and he hits really freaking hard, too. Like,
Yeah.
that was the point where I was pretty confident with the amount of life I had. I was like, oh, you can't do that too many times.
Yeah, it's just the dumbest boss that ultimately is actually pretty easy, but just the hubris of me of going like, this dumb computer. Oh God.
Whoops.
Yeah. All right, guys. I think we'll get into some speed runs, and then we'll get into some final thoughts before we close out the episode. So, just a couple of speed runs I noted here. They speed run this on every difficulty, I should say, and I only captured the ones that are on for normal because that's probably typically what most will play. I'd recommend totally fine playing on easy because this game is pretty difficult on normal. If anything, easy is a good primer to get you used to the levels, so you know how to kind of get through normal.
I still died, but it wasn't a frustrating amount.
Yeah, it was pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
I think overall, like, this difficulty is hard, but I wouldn't say cheap because you have a lot of options with what you can do, and even the melee helps a ton.
Yeah,
even though you discovered it halfway through the game.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I can do that.
So these speed runs in general, like easy, normal, hard. There's really only about a variance of 3 to 6 minutes, but for normal, we have any percent, which is typically just get through the game as quick as possible. This was by a person named Shaddix. They beat the game in 32 minutes, 45 seconds, and there's any percent co-op with Jim SR and Rohisak, I think it is. 30 minutes, 15 seconds. So both pretty impressive runs. I did kind of scope through a speed run that someone put up on Games Done Quick from, I think, 2018. And of course, it's just ridiculous. I think he beat the game in like 35 minutes or something like that. And he's just telling you about everything you could do. Like, he did co-op, and he just kept throwing his buddy into bosses because that does the most damage, apparently. That's like the most damaging move.
Was he even with a second player?
He was. They were doing co-op.
Oh, okay.
And then also at Dice Palace, only one player wants to play because then you both have to roll or something. I forgot how it works. So that's one way to kind of speed up the game too. But nonetheless, impressive to watch because this game, like I said, is not a cakewalk. It's pretty damn difficult.
Well, and these, all speed runs are impressive, but this was the game where I felt like, yeah, that makes sense when I looked at it. Like, I feel like I got through a good chunk of it in about a half an hour. I think I was watching a show in the background too, and it was maybe only 2 episodes long of like a typical sitcom. And I was like, I'm already at the little shoot 'em up in space.
Yeah.
So I was doing pretty good for myself on, and like all these runs before that I've done, I don't remember getting past a couple of the levels. I think because I was on normal and it was just handing me my ass. But this one I was like, wow, easy is fun.
Yeah, easy is sort of like the great difficulty. Plus, again, you can play this on Nintendo Switch Online on the Sega Genesis app, so that has save states. I believe it's still on the Xbox store as well. I'm not sure if it's on PS Plus. I can't recall. It's also on the Sega collection that's out. Just note the digital version is getting delisted December 6th. So pick
it's in
that up
like
if you haven't.
every Sega collection ever.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's gone as far as like Game Boy Advance, PS2. It's been on tons of collections since, which is great because more people should definitely play this game.
Yeah.
Some final thoughts. For me, this game is definitely an upper echelon, like top 10, maybe top 5 Genesis game as far as just, being unique to the Genesis and showing what the Genesis can do. Because I think this is like through and through a game you could see only on the Genesis. You couldn't see it on any other system back then. I think Treasure is just a fantastic developer. This is a pretty incredible first showing for them. And beyond that, like, it's just you could tell like they had roots in Konami, right? With Contra and Super Castlevania. Like there's so many ideas that you could say influenced this game, but they made it their own. And it's just a fast, frenetic, insane Contra-like game and Metal Slug, but a totally different flavor that you can enjoy more than those, arguably.
Yeah, I will say for my final thoughts, like, thank Juan for introducing me to this way back then. And when he first did it, I was like, oh, this is a cool, like, run and gun shooter. And to me, that genre was very samey. Like you mentioned Contra and Metal Slug and everything. And I'm like, okay, this is fun. This is a new version of that, but it's also just like those. And it was only until this, like, recent playthrough where I was like, oh, I see why this is special now. And I see why people, like, if you know, like, if you talk to somebody and they do know about it, they won't have a bad word to say about it. They'll be like, this is one of my top games.
Yeah, once you play it, you're like, this is it. Like, there's no...
Yeah.
You can't say you didn't play this and didn't enjoy it. You're going to enjoy the hell of this game. Juan, put a bow on Gunstar for us.
Well, so I guess I would say this. When you're a kid and you play these games that end up shaping your life, they hold a special place in your heart. That's where Gunstar is for me. But I think its best impact on me, and I hope other people out there, is it makes you want to have that feeling again, right? So that first time, Donnie, to your experience with this game, that first time you walked into that board game level and you thought, wait, what?
Yeah.
It was just, or Deucy, you said that when you replayed it, it showed you some stuff. I'm hoping that the first time you realized, wait, how the heck did they do the spaceship level? That feeling, that wonder of, oh, wow, video games can do this from a gameplay perspective. I've been chasing that ever since, and it served me well. So this game really opened my eyes to that feeling of, oh, wow, this is something unique. It's its own art form. And these guys from Treasure, like I said, I finally have realized that they hung it all out there, right? As we say in sports and other things, leave it all out on the field. And they really did with this game. And can't wait to go home and play it again.
Yeah.
You're chomping at the bit. Yeah, well, fantastic one. I'm really glad you joined us here as a guest and you suggested a incredible game. Like I said, I will always love the Genesis. I think this is a perfect example of a fantastic Genesis game. For our friends out there, if you want to reach out to us, you can email us at legiongamingpod@gmail.com. And we're also on Instagram more than Threads or anything else. We're at Legion Gaming Podcast there. And we're also on Threads. We'll post updates and all kinds of good stuff. All the stuff that you usually see on Instagram. And that's also at Legion Gaming Podcast. Deucy, any final words for our friends going off to dive into more Treasure?
Press start to continue.